Hi, my name is Sage, and this week, well, actually last week, I made a poll and y'all voted, and now I'm gonna be doing a hybrid of two animals out of clay. And those two animals are the bee and the beaver. But by the title, you're probably, get it, bee? Like, dude, where's the zomb? The zombie. The zomb was added because that's where the path of the Bee-Ver took me, and I want to take y'all along on this very chaotic journey with me. So without further ado, I'm gonna need some tin foil and some clay. Next, I'm gonna take that tin foil and fold it up hot dog style before then just scrunching it all up. And once it's somewhat formed into a top part for the head and a bottom part for the body, I then bam! Cover it in clay. So now that it's looking like an animal of some sort, it's now time to add the knees. The bee's knees. And by bee's knees, I do mean the beaver. And so I take a piece of clay and kind of flatten it out, but not really, as you can see, and stick it on the back portion of this little animal. I then blend it to his body, and now it's looking like he has a leg now. But since he is part beaver, I'm gonna give him some flippers. So I take a piece of clay that's way too big for one flipper, as you can see here, before then ripping it up not once, but twice. And now I'm thinking, this looks like a good size, right? So I'm gonna flatten it out real quick. And I then decided, you know what? This piece is still too big. So I rip it again. And you're probably thinking, oh, third time's a charm, right? No, it just doesn't look right. So I end up pinching it a little bit more and molding it, and then fourth time is truly a charm on this one. So now that he has a leg and a flipper, I will bam, do the exact same thing on the other side as well. And I don't know if y'all know this, but beavers, so they have webbed feet for their flippers, but they also have nails on their webbed feet as shown here. I was not aware of that. I'm Canadian and I didn't even know what a beaver's foot looks like. That's crazy. So then I roll some little cones and stick them on his flippers, before then using my square stylus and pushing them all down to make sure they're all nice and sturdy, because in the future they don't fall off at all. I then repeat these steps on the other side as well. So now that he has his nails done, I can then attempt to make his eyes. And this is one of many attempts of me trying to make his eyes. So for this first one, I try and make them protrude, and then I thought he looked too much like a frog. So I ended up digging into his skull and trying to make a little hole for his eyes so that I could press the eye into it. And you know what? I hated that too. So I decided to go a completely different route and carve in his eyes instead by using my pointy stylus, and then I realized I hated that too. And so the next course of action is to obviously cover it up with more clay. And now I'm going to ignore my problems of the eyes and try to make his mouth. And I do that by using the pointy stylus, before then thinking, you know what, this beaver needs a really big mouth. And I don't know why, because they have a very tiny mouth in real life. But in my mind, that was the move. And now I'm thinking, you know what, I'm gonna add the buck teeth and that will fix everything, right? Wrong! Look at him! What is that? But just like the eyes, I decided, you know what? I'm going to ignore this and make him some ears, because I can't mess up on that, you know? It's just taking a small piece of clay and then molding it to his head. That is simple enough, and oddly enough, I liked the ears. But he himself is looking like a doofus. But instead of dealing with it, I went snip snip, and now I'm creating the antenna. And to do that, I take one of the pieces of wire that I snipped and just twist it onto itself so it's nice and textured, so when I put clay on it, it sticks. I then stab the antenna into his head, and I like the way it looks. So then I make another one. And the next step is just me putting clay on one antenna to make sure that I like it. I then put it on his head and then use my little ball stylus and go bop 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 all around it. So it sticks to the head. And since I like it, I then will bam, do the exact same thing on the other side. Next, I believe that adding eye sockets will help this creature's face, and I was wrong. He still got the case of the ugh the ugly. But it's okay. I'm gonna smush in his face, and then I think I'm gonna get rid of his eyes, but then I have an idea. What if I give him a really big nose instead? Because that is obviously what's missing on this beaver, a big nose. And I know it's getting worse and worse as it goes on, but you know what? Sometimes you just have to persevere, you know what I mean? You just gotta push through the ugh to get to the eventual cute. Like, honestly, at this point, what is a beaver? What is a beaver? Because I know it's not this. I'm aware that it's not looking... And now it's time to deal with my problems. And by deal with my problems, I mean smush his face. I need to get rid of it. I need a blank slate. But not before randomly giving him eye sockets again. And then cutscene, his face is now semi-smooth yet again, completely blank, and I'm going with a whole new method. And by whole new method, I mean I'm gonna do the exact same thing I did at the beginning and give him protruding eyes. But this time, it's gonna work. So now I'm gonna give him more of a bee face rather than a beaver, because why not, you know? You best believe it. And here, I'm just smoothing out his face a little bit, and then I'm also gonna add a little bit more clay to an eye because I need to always mess with them. So now that I'm actually happy with the eyes, I then move to his tail. I'm gonna give him a beaver tail because obviously the beaver face was not happening. And I take one of my styluses that have a bunch of little like bumps on it and just run that up and down on the tail to give it some texture. Before then putting 2 little clay lumps on his back, as these will be the nodules that the wings are gonna go on. And you may be like, dude, you're gonna make some wings in this video? Yeah, I am. But not for a long time. Instead, I'm making an arm right now. I then attach a hand to this arm, and just like his little toes / nails, I just take some little cones that I mold out of the clay and attach them, and I know they look a little long, but I have an idea that he's gonna hold something later on. And hopefully that idea doesn't just horribly fail in the future. Foreshadowing! But now, bam, he has 2 hands and 2 arms. So now I gotta make him something to hold, and I decided on a branch, because you know, beavers, woodland, I just thought it was the move. So I take some thick wire and wrap some thinner wire around that before then realizing it's way too long. So then I cut it, and I just think it looks better proportionately. So I then cover it with clay and I make it look branch-like, and I didn't realize that the camera wasn't really pointing at what I was doing, so that's my bad. But I make it into a branch and I put it in his hand. So I wrap his fingers around the branch, and then his arm fell off. Hopefully this isn't foreshadowing the foreshadowing that I already foreshadowed it for the future. But now I reattach his arm because that's the thing to do, right? So I take my ball stylus and smooth out the shoulder to the body before then realizing, you know what? I have to give him some texture to imply that there's fur all over him because he's fuzzy. Or should I say buzzy? And I just continue doing that until he looks like this. And now I can put him into the oven. And that's where tragedy strikes. His arm fell off. Shocker, I know. Plot twist. But if you think losing an arm is gonna stop this bee, nuh-uh. Nay, this bee has just been bewitched. And now he's part zombie. And since he's part Zom-bee, when I'm painting him yellow, some of his claws fall off, but you know, that's probably part of the infliction. He's really fine, you know? And just because his arm fell off doesn't mean his arm's not gonna be painted. I'm gonna paint it yellow to match. So now that his body and his arm both have one coat of yellow, I then do another one off screen, and bam, this is what it looks like. I then take the black paint and I paint both of his eyes, both of his antennas, and his tail black. So everything's all mitchy-matchy. Next, I begin to work on his black stripes. I don't make them too thick because I really want the yellow to be the center of attention when you look at him to really emphasize the bee, and I don't want it to take away from his antennas or his eyes or his tail. So I just put random stripes all over his body, and I make them a little bit thicker and thinner in some areas just to give him some variation. And while I wait for that to dry, I paint the branch with an umber brown because obviously umber brown is cool. Well, it's really warm, but still. Next is the zombieifying process. So I take some pink and I dab it along where the arm fell off, and on the arm where that part fell off, and on the claws where they fell off. Basically anywhere that there's an indent of some sort or a mistake, I make sure that it looks zombieified. Off screen, I painted this eye a little bit more black to go over top of it with the pink, so it kind of looks a little glazed, just to really emphasize the Zom-bee. And on the other eye, I didn't really put any black on. I thought it was still a little bit tacky. I was wrong. So I added a little bit more black with the pink as I put it on. And now he kind of looks like he has glazed eyes. Next, I go in with a red color and I go over all of the pink spots with the red by just dabbing it everywhere, not really being precise or anything like that. I just really wanted it to give like the illusion that there's wears and tears on this zombie. And when I begin to outline his eye with the red and the pink, I then go over the red and pink with some more yellow to kind of make it look stained slash like maybe his eyes bleeding a little bit. Who knows? It's the zombie infliction. I also go over his hand with the same method of the red, pink, and then also going over it with some yellow as well. And wherever I got black spots that weren't supposed to be there, I go over them with the pink and red just so I can cover it up easier because the yellow was having a hard time. But then I do go back to his hand that fell off and do the exact same thing, just kind of zombieify everything more with the pink and the red. Next, I'm going to be working on the wings, and I'm using this plastic, and this plastic that I'm using is for gift wrapping, so it's really flimsy and really see-through, and you can't really see it too well on camera. So just imagine that I cut out 4 oval-shaped wings, and bam! Now they're all here. Not that you can really even see them. So I lay down a piece of paper and I start to use my Posca to draw on all of the little winged patterns on them, and I know that they should be black, but I only have a white Posca and he's undead, so I think it all works out. And once I'm done drawing on the patterns, I then take the Gorilla Glue and glue 2 of them onto the little nodules that I made on his back before then gluing the other ones underneath the ones that I already glued on. And once the wings are all good to go, I then do one more coat on the branch, and that's the end of this craft. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. And now it's time for the glamour shots.